So we are now live on YouTube. Hello, everybody attending us on via the YouTube channel of the Kulturpolitische Gesellschaft. And hello, everybody coming in here in our webinar session. I'm just waiting. Short moment until I start the moderation. Okay, hello and welcome everybody to our last web talk on cultural education. Today we hope to learn from others. It's now a tradition within the Cultural Policy Academy to widen the view of the last web talk in our series to just learn from more perspectives. And today we have the great pleasure to get insights in the concepts of cultural education in Austria, the United Kingdom, and Poland. Welcome for now, and thank you for being here with us, Johanna Orlik from the Malopolska Institute of Culture in Krakow, Ulrike Giesner-Bogner from the ÖAD Agency for Education and Internationalization in Austria, and Diane Fisher-Naylor from CCE in the UK. I will present you later with your roles and biographies. And today we will talk about the different perspectives you can supply for us so that we can learn from best practices. We discussed in our former web talks the necessary of reality check in cultural education under changing conditions of the society, like digitalization, diversity and sustainability, or even the corona pandemic. And we also talked or discussed about the future design of the field of practice. And we are really interested in what approaches are being taken in other European countries. And it would be great to learn from your experiences made in the field of the cultural education. And again, as always, we asked or we try a little poll from our attendees here, from our audience, to learn from which working background you are connected to us. And we would like to start this poll and get to know if you are from the field of cultural education, cultural administration, cultural policy, cultural research, or even cultural institutions or artists. This is interesting for us. We decided to just let you only choose one point so that this gets that we get a sharp image of the of your background. And I'm waiting for everybody to just press a little button so that you can submit for this poll. Then I close it. Is everybody chosen? Okay, then I end the poll, and we see that we have surely about half of your of the attendees with a background of cultural education. This has been through the whole web talk series the same. Cultural administration is attending us, and even some of you are from the field of cultural policy, which is quite interesting for us artists also and cultural institutions. So thank you very much for giving us this insight in your working background. And as you probably know, if you attended further web talks of our series, we give you the chance to submit some questions in this Q&A box, which is made for the questions. You can add some comments in the chat. I will try to take them for the discussion. We now begin with 3 short inputs, and after every input, you can ask special questions for the speaker, and then we at the end have a discussion, and you are also invited to submit further questions or comments to this discussion. This is the plan for today. And now I would like to get over to the first input, which is given to us by Joanna Orlik. She is director of the Malopolska Institute of Culture in Krakow, and she is the managing director. She has been working for the last 20 years for the regional Malopolska Institute of Culture, and she founded and was the first editor-in-chief of a quarterly review, Autoportrait, and her thesis she wrote about Polish-Russian cultural relationships during the Khrushchev era. And she is also a former chairman of the Krakow Forum, an NGO association, and has a lot more experience in different fields, but she is giving us an insight in your work, and she wrote a claim over her input: "Is culture a cherry on top?" I'm very curious to hear about. Joanna, the microphone is yours.
Thank you so much. I'm sharing my presentation. Is it working? Yes, perfect. Yes, thank you so much for inviting me. It's a great pleasure and a great honor. And I've been thinking about what I want to, what kind of thinking I can share with you this afternoon. And I've come up with a few thoughts. And they are somehow related to the main question: is culture just a cherry on the top? My first thought comes from a book of the utmost importance. It's on tyranny, 20 Lessons from the 20th Century by Timothy Snyder. I would like to focus on the second lesson, which is entitled Defend Institutions. So actually my first thought is a quotation. And for those who know the book, you are aware of the fact that the lessons are really short. They are not developed. They are rather raw ideas. So let's think about this headword, defend institution, as a challenge, a job for us today. Why is this lesson important to me? So after my bio was presented, I think it's quite obvious to you. I've been working for an institution for the last 20 years, and I'm quite convinced that its presence can change a lot, because I was watching it grow. And what is important here, at least in my opinion, is the memory of the organization. The institution repeats tasks and can learn from itself. And this is the process of growth. Of course, it can become boring. We all know this kind of cumbersome institutions which can't really move forward because they have too much to carry on. But in our quickly changing world, I'd say it's not only a problem anymore. I'd rather look at the weight of an institution as an anchorage. It can be capital. It can be a pile of solutions to be used when they are needed. It's quite easy to predict that when I'm talking about institutions, I have cultural institutions in mind, but it's not enough here. When we come to the sociological definition, we have actually two options. The first one, when an institution is an organization, and this is the most obvious option, the classic one. There are arts like dance, theater, or music, and we have special institutions for performing them. The opera house, the harmonic house, the theater, the cultural center. Actually, this is what we mostly call culture, even the high culture. Often we need some kind of education, some preparation to understand it. And we take pleasure from it, from being educated enough to read it. It's nice, I'm doing it myself. But there's also another group of institutions which are established laws or practices. And what I actually have in mind here are our everyday habits, the way we eat, the way we work, the way we argue, the way we have fun. The habits we are used to follow without really thinking about them. They're just a certain way for us to be together and also to take pleasure from being a part of the situation. Because this is our way of life, we can easily immerse ourselves in. This is our culture, the broad meaning of it. Recently, in an important theater in Krakow, a performance of Dziady, a classic masterpiece of Polish Romanticism, was staged. And just after the first night of the play, the educational officer declared it not being politically correct and not suitable for schools. And for those who are not familiar with Polish Romanticism, this piece was written by Adam Mickiewicz, the most important Polish poet, and it is a prescribed reading in the Polish school curriculum. Diversity is a richness. Taking part in many European projects, I was told many times this is a very important statement. And I agree with it completely. But is it the only thing we can say about diversity? Going to the theater is probably our common experience of the educated, elevated European citizens who love culture. But is it really easy for you to understand what has happened in the Krakow theater? Why is the performance so oppressive for the educational officer to discard schools from coming and seeing it? And this is just one example taken from so-called high culture. And what about the other cultural patterns we use every day, taken from both high and broad culture? They are so numerous. Do you really understand them? There are people who queue and people who hate queuing. There are people who always come on time and people who can't ever make it. There are people who in the morning can eat only croissant au chocolat, and those who can't imagine starting a day without eggs and sausages. And I eat porridge with cinnamon and dates. And this is all our common and only sometimes shared patchwork of European culture. This is what I call a broad culture. A lot of meanings, a lot of senses, a lot of potential emotions, conflicts even. It is beautiful. It is enriching. It is fascinating. But let's face the practical side of it. Most of you won't easily understand why the Polish educational officer fights against the theater performance in Krakow. Let's now move on to the primary question. Maybe I'm wrong, but my experience taken from being a member of some international European networks is that culture is too often seen as just a cherry on the cake. Something beautiful, but additional, exclusive and not essential, fascinating, but not crucial, not important for everyday life. Of course, we who work in the cultural field, we try to convince ourselves and our politicians that culture is really needed. It can bring money, solve social problems, revitalize degraded quarters. But truth be told, it's not only what I think we should call culture and consequently culture education. Because deep down, culture is nothing additional. Culture is essential. Everything we face every day is culture. And that's why I really think we should broaden the practical definition of what culture really is and fight for practical implementation of it. And I'm not talking only about our personal choices. I'm talking about the local, regional, national, and European, mostly European choices. When we think about what culture consists of, all those small practices which can be annoyingly different, I think we should look for commonalities rather than differences. We should very consciously and by design look for what we can call cultural common denominators. They do exist in our cultures. We just don't focus on them. And why do we focus on the differences? The answer is actually very simple, because this is how our brain is built. When we had to focus on them, because in the evolutionary context, the differences could be dangerous for us. But we are much too focused on them right now. We should hurry to invent incentives to look for commonalities instead. I have started with Snyder, but I would like to mention one more author here. It's John Yates and his book Fractured: Why Our Societies Are Coming Apart and How We Put Them Back Together Again. In his book, he talks about repetition, which builds teams and trust. And this is exactly what institutions are really good at. So why in our cultural practices, in the cultural education we provide, won't we choose to underline the commonalities? Why won't we have special programs for it? Yates even uses the word routine. It's another word which can sound so contradictory to culture. But once again, let's think about it as an anchorage. Capital, common path. The European Union is already seen as a place for constant learning. We have programs for job-changing situations. We have established the idea of lifelong learning process. We just need to do the same for the cultural field. We need finances and structures to strategically look for commonalities, common denominators, common understanding of the used words, common understanding of the power of repeating practices, and the right tools for successful implementation. And if we do this, I believe it will really help us to live better together. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Joanna. This was a great ending with such a hope for a better future, or a future where we can also improve. Optimize the cultural education. We talked a lot about the needs. I just wanted to encourage our attendees, if you want to ask the question in German. I will try to translate it also for Joanna. So use the Q&A box or the F und A. I really liked your idea to just give cultural education another standing, or to just focus on this. That's important to know about the power and the energy coming from cultural and education. You really made a great portfolio where cultural education is needed and where it can help. And you also mentioned that there is a need to convince or to go in the direction of the policy makers. Do you have some hints in which direction you would recommend using the idea of convincing, or what can help to go further to supply the money and everything we need? This is the interface where we can maybe
so my experience
work on.
Yeah, thank you. My experience comes from this international networks my institution is a member of. And I face this like lack of exact understanding the words we used for describing the cultural field. So it looks like we use the same words, but we have different definitions in mind actually when we talk about them. So it depends, of course, on the level. It's going to be different for regional level, the level I have the biggest experience with. But actually, I was talking mostly about this European level because I think we really need it. And the point is that the European Union gives rights to makes for each countries their own policies, which is great. But also, I think we should at least start talk about looking for commonalities for our countries. And it would be great if we have a program like that just for supporting looking for the commonalities. It's, if there is anybody from the European Commission here, please let us know. I'm the first who is ready to work on it.
That's a good encouraging maybe to develop programs, or to it's at the end we are always talking about resources. Yeah. Okay, then I pick something. Diane, you wrote a comment in our chat. You said that your own experience at that many cultural institutions have opened their doors digitally during COVID. And maybe we will hear about your experiences in this special also researches, yeah, and have been able to support learning and education in schools, not just in their own countries, but further afield. How can we build on this? Is this a question for Joanna? Or maybe we can take this question for our discussion at the end. Or do you want to just refer?
I think it's a question to everybody. I'm really interested. It's something which I've become very aware of over the last 2 years since the pandemic began. I think schools have been online, they've been digital, they've been looking for rich experiences for their children and young people, and many have reached out, and arts and cultural organisations have reached in to schools and provided really amazing arts and cultural experiences digitally. And I think there's something wonderful about visiting an institution. There's something amazing about walking through the doors of a theatre for the first time. I remember my own personal experience of that as a child, but we're not always able to do that. We have schools in very remote places who, for whom accessing arts and culture can be really expensive and challenging. And I think there's been some amazing, really interesting and exciting practice happening as a response to COVID.
Yeah, I just added this your comment or your inspiration and impulse in the chat for everybody, so that you can think about. I see the first question coming in. I take only this question, and maybe Joanna, you wanted to ask on Dai's comment. We can.
Just very quickly, talking about cultural institutions, I have in mind also people from cultural institutions going out. We have a program for institutions and schools to make bridges between those two fields by making projects together, and it really works. So yeah, this is program.
But let's have this in mind. Our discussion is getting on the street now, but we still have two more inputs. And at the end, I think everything comes together. And there was also a question from Rolf Witte if we should differentiate clearer between the arts and cultural practice. So this is maybe also something which, after our inputs, after Ulrike and Dai will give their inputs, can lead us to the discussion at the end, because I think that this definition thing is something we should at the end try to get clearer and to have a look on this again. But now we still have been touching the schools and this subject. So now we go over to the next input from Ulrike Giesner-Bogner, who is speaking about cultural education with schools and the perspective from Austria. She is head of sector cultural education with schools at the ÖAD Agency for Education and Internationalization. You will tell us more about your work. And you studied theater science, Spanish, and cultural management, and you are head of the cultural education with schools department since 2004. So you have a long experience in this field, and you also have been the coordinator for cultural management in Europe. Also, this overview on the European programs at Kulturkontakt Austria, and you have been the head of the department's training and project management at the Austrian Cultural Service. You're also at the advisory board of Double Check Network for Culture and Education in Vorarlberg. So this just to orientate in which field you are working, and you will give us now your insights. Please take over the microphone.
Yeah, thank you very much. Hello, everybody. Good afternoon, good evening. Thank you for inviting me to bring in some perspectives and some aspects from Austria to the discussion about the future of cultural education. I will share also the screen for a short presentation. So I hope you can see it. A short overview about my organization I'm working in. It's this special name ÖAD. In German we say it's an organization based in Vienna, founded 60 years ago, so it's quite old. And it's an agency for education on behalf of the Federal Ministry of Education, Science and Research in Austria. So it's an agency of the Republic of Austria. And in general, the whole organization advises and supports people and institutions in education field, in science research, and also cultural education. In Austria, in Europe, and in some countries also on an international level. And the ÖAD is in Austria also the agency for Erasmus+. So for this, it's very famous in Austria. And we have in all these different aspects also a small department for cultural education with schools where I'm working in, and we are 14 persons, 14 colleagues, and we are supporting the cultural education programs in Austria on behalf of the Federal Ministry. So we have 5 different programs, and in general, we advise teachers, artists, cultural educators, how they can cooperate and how they can work together at these interfaces between arts, culture, and schools. We give financial support for cultural education projects, so we are very project-oriented. In cultural projects in schools, in all types of schools, all school levels, and all over Austria. And with the different programs, we can funding up to 3,000 projects per year, which are realizing in the schools. And we have different programs. One large program is for cooperation between schools and artists. Other programs are for the cooperation between cultural institutions and schools. And we have also special programs for vocational schools. So in German, Berufsschule, and programs for apprentices. So this is a special group also in our portfolio. We reach with the programs around 150,000 students per year. So students are pupils between 6 and 19 years old in around 2,000 schools, and in schools from primary level, secondary level, vocational schools. And in comparison, to have a relation in Austria, there are existing around 5,600 schools altogether, and with 1,115,000 students. So this is the whole amount of persons. And we are reaching with our programs around 12 or 13% of all students, all pupils in Austria. So what we are doing, oh, sorry. Yeah. So this was a general overview, and now I want to present you in a short version our largest program. It's a program that started this school year in September, and we have put together 2 programs we had before, and now it's a really large one. It's the largest program in Austria for cultural education with schools. And in this program, teachers from all school types can bring in applications for projects in which they want to cooperate with artists on an activity-oriented and participative way. And we can fund these projects, and the teachers, and also in cooperation with the artists, can apply with the projects all over the school year. So we have no deadlines, etc. It's a very flexible program because the schools can decide we want to cooperate with a dancer, with theater, with visual artists, with musicians. So it's our projects in all art disciplines, you can imagine. And we have also consultancies in this different art disciplines, so then we can advise the artists, the cultural educators, and the teachers, as I said before, how they can use the possibilities of working together. And I would like to also present you a special topic we had started in 2019, and we are also dealing with it, and it's a special topic over the different programs. So it's not a special program, but it's going in the different programs because we think that the interface between cultural education and digital media is really an important issue, which is in all programs can we deal with this and working with it. So we have this focus More Than Bytes, cultural education and digital media. And the starting point of working with this focus was the general idea that digitalization causes a huge transformation process in all fields of society, in education, in science, in economy, in the world of work, in leisure, so in the different parts of society, and especially also in the lives of young people. And the next idea was that the activities of cultural education can offer great possibilities to deal with all these questions of the transformation process. And in German, sometimes you make difference between digitalization and digitality. So this word Digitalität, I think it's very popular in the German context. Digitalität and also post-digitality. And we try to differ in this focus More Than Byte with the process of digitalization, which is more, in our opinion, the process of the technical process, the technical ideas, and the word digitality, which means more the interactions between the technique and the human beings, and also including all social cultural changes caused by the digital change. So in the context of digitality, school is, in our opinion, a very important place in society to discuss and reflect this transformation process and to support young people to build capacities, especially in media literacy. And we are working in this context with a quite old model of media literacy. It's going back to Dieter Barke from the 1998. So it is a model for competencies in media literacy, and it's divided up in the use of media, the knowledge about media, the critical reflection of media, and the creation of media. And also this model is about 20 years. We are thinking that it works very good also in the context of cultural education, because cultural education projects offer possibilities in all these 4 fields, especially in the context of critical reflection, which is quite important in this context, and also in the field of creation and self-expression. So these 2 parts of the whole media literacy are very important in the context of cultural education. And we started with this focus before COVID-19 crisis in September 2019. So it was quite interesting to start with this focus and to motivate teachers and artists to bring in cultural projects in the context of digital media in the schools and to work with the students. And then we had, like everybody, the change from March 2020 on with COVID-19 crisis. And then we, and I think everybody else, has to switch to online and distance learning settings. So we had in this focus from More Than Bytes the change that especially the artists has to adapt all their settings, workshop ideas, project ideas from analog setting to online settings. And last year, and also this year in 21, we organized up to 8 or 9 panels and small conferences, also to support artists and teachers how they can make the change from analog settings in cultural education projects to online settings. So, because for us it was very important to do this, because otherwise no cultural education project would be realized, because in Austria it was for a long time, and also now it's really forbidden for artists to go into schools and to work there. So we have different security levels in the schools. And at the moment, the last month, again, we had a lockdown in Austria, and we had also the security level in the schools, that it's not allowed that external persons can enter the schools and to work there. And for this reason, for us, it's very important also to foster and to support these online settings. Otherwise, there will no realization of cultural education projects at all, and this is quite a problem. And we see now that there is a change when the school is open, that artists can go in, but it changes every several weeks. But it's very obvious that now the cultural education project setting is a mixture between analog setting and digital setting, so the so-called hybrid settings. I think this is very popular in all cultural education areas and fields we are working on. And I think this is also one of future points for cultural education in general, that these hybrid settings will go on and will exist in the future. So I don't think also whenever the COVID-19 crisis will be over, then we won't in general switch back to only analog settings. I think it will be a mixture from both, changing between analog and digital, and in this so-called post-digital era we are living now. And yeah, this is, on the one hand, it's quite interesting because you see that the artists and also cultural institutions, they develop the new settings and they try to be in contact with students in schools and with the teachers. But on the other side, we see also a strong longing for personal interaction. So this is a feedback of a lot of teachers and artists given to us, so that they really suffer to be again in an analog setting and to have this personal contact and to have personal possibility to work directly together with children and young people. So we see some kind of Zoom fatigue. Like for everybody, it's sometimes a little bit taking energy. So yeah, this is one situation in Austria I would like to join with you. And I think for the future, as I said, will be these hybrid settings will stay and will longer last. And the other thing I think is what will happen when we coming to time when really COVID-19 will be behind us, and what are the rebuilding processes, because we sometimes a little bit have fear about that the schools really will have the energy again to take out all these cultural education projects, and that it will really go on in this direction, that it's an important part in daily life of students in schools. So thank you. This was my...
Yeah, thank you very much. Ulrike, this was a great insight also in the need of these programs, and I would love to discuss later. I think we can go over to the next input now, so that at the end we have enough time to speak together. The question you have given at the end, if what will COVID-19 have, what impact does COVID-19 has on all this, and also about the disruption and the transformation into digital literacy and everything like this. This would be great to discuss it in this in this round, and thank you very much for your input. And I hurry up to get to Diane Fischer-Naylor, the Director of Creativity, Culture and Education. This is CCE at the UK. She is responsible for the design, implementation and quality assurance. Also interesting, this aspect, the quality of CCSE's programs, and she has a history, or has her experiences in the field of cultural education are coming from different institutions, the school program for creative partnership in England. Maybe we can talk about this. And you have also been working at the Arts Council in England as a national director of grants for the arts, and you have been responsible for several programs across the country, and the development programs in capitals and lottery funds and everything. But we are very much interested in the insight you can give us now on the art of learning, and also about some researches you can share with us.
Thank you very much, Anke. I think I should also say that sounds like a grand list of jobs. However, I'm personally very invested in the very important role the arts can play in changing young people's lives. From my own very personal perspective, I left school when I was 14, and I have to say, working alongside some artists as a teenager really fundamentally changed my life, and I'm sure it's changed many others as well. So I come at this from a very, very personal perspective, and absolutely see the value of the arts in school and out of school programs as well. As you said, CCE is based in the UK. We're an international creative learning foundation, and we want to put the arts and creativity at the centre of education and learning. Although we're based in the UK, we work all over the globe, working with policymakers, educationalists, foundations, governments and arts councils. And at the moment we're working across a whole series of countries, including here in England, in Ireland, in Hungary, in Norway, Thailand, Pakistan and Chile, and South America as well. And we really aim to transform through our work the learning experiences of children and young people, and supporting them to unlock their potential for achievement, for attainment and their well-being. And we do that by working and supporting the confidence and the capacity of the educators in their lives, be they teachers or be they artists or creative practitioners. And today I want to share with you some research that we've been involved in for a number of years, which I hope adds to some of our collective thinking, particularly around the sustainability of arts education practices in schools, and also around supporting the professional development of teachers. But I think it also hopefully provides us with and adds to our collective thinking about how we can bring policy, practice and science together in one space, and how we can actually, by working together, learn from each other and discover much more about the value that the arts in education and learning can bring. So as I said, the programme I want to talk to you about is the art of learning, and it involves teachers, artists, neuroscientists and digital designers, exploring the role the arts can have in everyday school life, and the role that can play in the development in children's brain function, in their executive functions. The exploration of executive functions within CCE is really inspired by a woman called Adele Diamond. She's a professor of neuroscience at the University of British Columbia. And Adele talks very passionately and eloquently about the role the arts can play in developing children's executive functions. She has a really amazing TED talk titled Turning Some Ideas on Their Head. If you're interested to learn more about it, I will post a link to that in the chat. But at CC, we invested lots of time and energy and money in researching the impact our arts and creative learning programmes were having on children and young people. And we knew that they were having a really positive impact on their attainment in maths and reading and writing. But in looking much more closely at the role executive functions play in learning, we had a theory that what we were actually doing was impacting on their executive functions. So we wanted to test that out. And so about 5 years ago, we began exploring that in a series of pilots. And we're currently in a really exciting, very, very deep 2-year pilot, led by our partners in Norway, in Innlandet municipality, and also by our partner Talkie2Doc in Hungary. Now, this sometimes happens. Sorry, my presentation doesn't want to move on, so I'm just going to see whether I
So maybe if you try the right side of the mouse.
Yeah, I'll just try that again.
Yeah.
Bear with me. Nope, for some reason it doesn't want to move on, so I'll stop sharing it and I'll just move it on.
Is it a PDF or?
No, it's just a normal presentation, but let's see whether I can just get it to just try sharing it again. Let's see whether this works. Oh, there you go. Sometimes it does this.
Yeah.
So what is the Art of Learning? It's a 2-year, really intensive research programme delivered in schools as part of everyday school life. It has artists working in long-term partnerships and relationships with teachers and their students, and they are working together to implement a specially designed learning programme. The learning that the children receive as part of the Art of Learning is steeped in the arts and culture, but it's directly linked to the everyday school curriculum for children in the early years of school, between the ages of 6 and 8. The curriculum that we've worked on has been developed in cooperation with educators and artists in a range of different countries, and builds on some of our work from other programmes like Creative Partnerships, which you referred to earlier. But it consists of 48 weeks, a 48-week programme. 24 weeks happen in year 1 and 24 weeks happen in year 2. And during each 2 weeks, children experience 6 90-minute sessions, 4 of which are delivered by the artist and the teacher working collaboratively together, and 2 of the sessions are delivered by the teachers working independently on their own, so that they can develop their own practice, so that the programme becomes really embedded in the life of the school, and it develops their knowledge and experiences in using the arts and creative approaches to deliver that core element of the curriculum. Each of the themes for the Art of Learning, there are, as I say, there are 28 themes, but they focus on different topics. And the topics were mainly chosen by the children and young people themselves when we had conversations with them about things that really interested them. So they include about me, friendships, in our homes, mysteries and first days. And we're currently developing the next series of themes at the moment. We're sort of working incredibly hard to get those ready for September next year. But the themes that we're looking at include loneliness, death, and making babies. So these are very challenging but important subjects, and I think what they do is they bring emotions and feelings and personal experiences directly into the classroom. And the Art of Learning is accompanied by a piece of independent research that looks at the effect this programme has on children's executive functions. And here are the partners in the project. I've already mentioned 2. I've already mentioned the Culture Department of Innlandet County Municipality. They are leading the project, but we also have Talkie2Doc, who are our partner in Hungary. And the programme involves 10 primary schools in 6 different municipalities in Inlandet and 5 schools in Hungary. Some of the schools are actively involved in the process, and some of the schools are control schools, and I'll talk a little bit more about that in a second. The partners are very diverse, so we support and learn from each other. And as I said, it brings practice, research, artists, teachers, policymakers, alongside national organisations responsible for arts and culture of children and young people together. Cultural Tanken, so we're working with the Inlandet Norway University of Applied Science, their psychologists within their psychology department. We're working with Culture Tanken, which are a government department for the arts and culture for children and young people. They take national responsibility across Norway for the cultural school bag. There's also the National Centre for Art and Culture, and they are a national organisation that works to really increase the provision of arts and culture in subjects from kindergarten all the way through to basic education in Norway. A really important partner as well is the Centre for Development of Inclusive Technologies, CEDETI, who are based in Chile in South America, and they bring together digital designers, artists, and psychologists, and they've developed some of the digital assessments that we're working with to assess children's executive functions in this process. A national organisation that focuses and supports families and children with attention deficit disorder, and also a theatre in the Fell region, and they are funding some of the artists who work with the Art of Learning schools in their region through the 2-year programme. So it's a very rich and diverse range of partners in the mix. So what is the goal of this project? What's the real goal? Our goal is really to explore whether a 2-year project, an arts-based learning programme as part of everyday school life, can this have a positive effect on the development of children's executive functions? And we're also particularly interested in investigating, can it have an effect, a better effect, on children who have poorly developed executive functions? Do their executive functions do they benefit from this sort of intervention more than other children? And the hypothesis we're exploring is that children who take part in this programme, that their executive functions will develop to a greater extent than the children in the control group. And we're also looking at to see whether we can, as a result of this, see improvements in the social environment, the culture of schools. Can we make inroads into changing the culture of schools? That has been something we've noticed in some of the pilots that took place. So I'm just going to briefly talk about what executive functions are. And if you go to that TED talk that I shared from Adele Diamond, she talks wonderfully about executive functions and the power that the arts can have on the development of children and young people's executive functions. But think about working memory. Working memory is particularly important for reading, for writing, and for mathematics. And this is about seeing connections, mentally being able to relate one idea or fact to another. It's about looking and seeing different perspectives, and it's about translating instructions into action plans. Inhibitory control is about self-control. It's about thinking before doing, thinking before acting, and resisting impulses to complete tasks. It's about being disciplined and completing things. And it's also about avoiding interference control, so about concentration, about paying attention, and our ability to stay when we've been given a task, to stay on task. And the final one is cognitive flexibility. And this is really about thinking outside the box, seeing things in a new way. It's about creative problem solving, being flexible, being able to switch perspectives or the focus of your attention, and adjusting to change demands or priorities. And research into executive functions is based obviously in psychology, and there's lots and lots of really interesting research out there. But what research has found is that executive functions are more important for school readiness than IQ or entry-level reading or maths assessments, and executive functions predict both maths and reading competence throughout school life. And they are absolutely the building blocks. They are essential for learning. CCE are also really interested in ensuring that children from disadvantaged backgrounds do the best in education that they can. And we know that in looking at executive functions, children who've come from poorer families, from more disadvantaged backgrounds, tend to arrive in school with weaker developed executive functions. But research shows that they benefit the most from interventions that actually support their development. So focusing on these important executive functions could have a really important role in reducing social disparities in their executive function and ultimately lead to them having better success in education and in life. And if we want to help children to thrive, working on their executive functions can really, really support them. They need challenge, they need training, and they need practice. Sadness and stress impair the development of executive function. So it's no surprise that there's lots of research emerging into the impact that COVID-19 has had on children's executive functions. Joy and a sense of social belonging and having a good social support network are important in developing children's executive functions as well. So in designing the content and designing the learning experiences of the art of learning, we've specifically focused on challenge, on repetition, on activities which children have to repeat, which add greater difficulty into them, and adding in opportunities to reflect and think about learning. Mm-hmm. And we provide opportunities through these activities to engage the whole child. So they're socially, emotionally, intellectually, and physically engaged. So we're using all of themselves. Just want to talk very, very quickly about how we're testing the executive functions. As I highlighted, the project brings together scientists and artists together, and the Inland University, the Department of Psychology, is responsible for the research element of the project, and they will research the impact that the programme has on the development of executive functions in the individual students who participate, and the results of this will be published out after the project is complete. We're working with our partner in Chile, in Sedeti, who have developed digital games that children do on a digital tablet, which assess their executive functions, and their executive functions were tested at the start of the programme earlier in the school year. They'll be tested again in May and June next year, then a year after that in May and June 2023, and then again in January and February 2024 to try and establish what the long-term impact this programme is having. We're also using something called Brief, which are a series of questionnaires that teachers and parents complete, and they'll also be completing those assessments throughout the life of the project to understand what they are noticing in relation to their children's executive functions. So just very, very quickly, so what do we want? What do we hope to achieve? What do we hope to understand by doing this project? We want to better understand what happens to children who are actively engaged or creatively engaged in arts activity in school. We want to ensure that and provide input into looking at how innovation, interdisciplinary work and creative learning methods can be really important in school. This is particularly important in Norway because they're currently implementing a brand new curriculum. We want to see how we can support teachers to expand their skills, knowledge and competence by them trying out new approaches and new practical methods in the classroom. And we want to understand how through this work, how do children's executive functions develop, and how can we support and treat underdeveloped executive functions. We want to increase the value of the artist's role in school and in learning, also increase interest in the arts, and and how that contributes to more children participating in arts and culture. If you want to find out more, here are the websites for the Art of Learning. Here's the website for creativity, culture and education. We're actively looking for new partnerships in relation to this. So if this is something you want to hear more about or learn more about, please drop us a name. We'd be really, really interested to hear from you. Thank you.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you, Diane. And I also sent the link to your website into the chat, and I added also the talks from Adele Diamond. So I just repeated to send in the links because there was somebody coming new over from YouTube to hear our discussion here. And thank you very much. I think this is a good idea to just do this research, and then we have the arguments for the cultural policy. Maybe we talked at the beginning about we need more resources, we need more money, and everything which encourages also even in the school programs that there is this cultural education, and that this can have a very, very a strong part over there. That's great to hear from your research, and we will follow up if it's a publication coming out. I think this is quite interesting to read, to go deeper into this. We don't have too much time to do our final discussion, but I want to come back to the question we got here from Rolf Witte. Maybe this is something we can take for our common or our joint discussion here now, because he's asking about the definition, not only arts and cultural education, but he especially wanted to know about the definition of culture, of high culture, and or about which culture we are talking. This is also something maybe we should focus in the question: is there a need of reality check of cultural education? And I would like to give this question to you in the round. Maybe you can take over this, Joanna. Do you have some thought about this?
Yes, so the question is quite broad.
Yeah.
Actually, it depends, because well, it can be really important to put exact and very precise definition what is and when art is just part of something bigger, which is culture. In the thought I wanted to share with you this afternoon, it's not that important to make this difference, because coming back to Yeats again, his book Fractured, he stresses the common situation. So actually it doesn't matter that much if we are talking about, for example, a choir and people who gather together like 2 times per week to sing together, which is art, especially if they're singing, I don't know, Renaissance songs, for instance. Or when we are talking about a group of children who learn how to bake gingerbreads, which is not art at all, probably, or rather not, rather social situation, yeah. But what I wanted to emphasize is that the repetition makes trust, because we are used to being together, which is also a big question concerning what you, Diane, said about the COVID times and being mostly in front of the monitor and being alone. So yeah, this is one thought. And another one, actually, this is a question to Diane, because when I was thinking about what is the common denominator for the 3 of us this afternoon, I think even though we didn't go through details, but our common denominator are programs dedicated to cultural field and educational field and making bridges between them. So actually we could make a very interesting comparison on the methodologies we use for those and for the impact. And the question to Diane is when we can read something about your effects, because this is really something I would like to use and also measure our activities.
The research from this project, this 2-year project, is not going to be available for another couple of years. You know, we're researching as we go, we're reflecting on the evidence as we go along, but there'll be a report published in probably 2 years' time, which will in effect look at both the quantitative data drawn from the executive function assessments of the children, and also the work done by the parents and the teachers as well, alongside qualitative evaluation as well, research where we'll be talking to children and teachers and parents as well about and the artists about what they've noticed. So those things will be brought together in a report. But there is a report. We did some work in Scotland for 2 years on the art of learning, and then we did a pilot project in Norway, in Landet, which led to us securing funding to work on this very intensive programme, because the results from all of the projects, and we've learned as we've gone along, we've adapted, we've developed the concept of the art of learning as we've gone through, as we've noticed and listened to the experiences of artists and teachers and young people in the programme. So it has been developed and adapted. But there is a report from the pilot project that we did in Norway that we could share, and we can send the link to that if people are interested in reading it. But we are going to do a big event around the project. You know, we'll be doing some sort of European event to share the results, and we'd be really interested in you all contributing and listening in and contributing to that. So we'll make sure that we keep you all posted about it, because we are very excited about the potential for it. The initial results have been very promising, you know, in changing the way children are in school, in developing their competences to learn, in their ability to collaborate with each other, alongside developing their executive functions. And teachers are already, even in a very short space of time, in the schools that have just started their work, they're already noticing some changes in their young people, noticing their ability to work together, to settle down to do a task much more quickly, and some really exciting changes in individual students as well, which, you know, we hope will have long-lasting impacts on both their engagement in school, but also for their lives in general as well. So it's a very exciting piece of research, and we're hoping that the results, that our hypothesis is the correct one.
Before I give Ulrike the chance to comment on this, I want to just mention that there was a good hint from Rolf Witte, that he pointed out that at Europe in Perspective EU on this website, we can go deeper into all the material for artists and teachers with which has been developed in partnership also with the ÖAD and the CCE. So just to add this for our listeners later to our talk who can't read the chat. So Ulrike, you probably want to add something to the
thank
discussion.
you. So this project mentioned by Rolf, it was a former EU project between Kulturkontakt, and now Kulturkontakt agendas are integrated in ÖAD. So it was in former times a cooperation also between ÖAD and CCE, so with Paul Collard in this context. This was quite interesting. Yes, the point I found very interesting in the presentation of Dai is the idea that, as I understood, that in Norway, really they want to implement a new curriculum and how to integrate their creative learning and learning with arts and artists, because we see in Austria, we are very project oriented in all these activities in schools. So you have the artistic subjects in schools, but it's very only in two fields, in the visual arts and in music. And on the other, in the other arts discipline is project oriented. So if you want to work together with a designer, with an architect, with literature, with dance, so you have to do it on a project based, in a project-based way. And the problem is, as you, Anke mentioned before, I think in our former discussion, that is like this Projektitis, that you do one project and another project and another project. And I mentioned before, we are carrying out a lot of projects each year all over Austria and in different schools. And it's quite important to have this inputs on a daily life basis, also for the students. But the other side of the coin is that it's really difficult to come in the system, in the school system, and also in the school development processes. So I think this is, the most complicated way of having cultural education activities in schools, that is really implemented in school development and quality management processes, and that you can change between the general development of the school in whole, and with all classes and with all teachers and with all students, and then also have cultural education projects on a basis like give different impulses in the daily life. So I think both sides would be important. In Austria, it's really, really very project oriented, and we have tried to do this next step. We had a program over 10 years to make cooperations on a long-term basis over 3 years, one school and one cultural institution working together over 3 years. But also with the experience of these 10 years of the program, it was really quite difficult to implement it in the school system as in general. But when we are talking about the schools who are taking part in all the programs, it's not really the whole school. It's on the basis of a class. So the projects every time are working one teacher with it or her class and one or two artists or a cultural institution. So I think to switch from this class level to school level and to see what could be the development process for the whole school in different terms. So this is the Königsdisziplin.
That's great. Königsdisziplin is a very good word to close our last session. We now have. I see that the discussion can go further, and we won't come to a very short solution today. The last session we also had the insight into a new school system developed in Düsseldorf by Hannes Stork. He showed us that it's quite interesting what the school itself can do, and it's also the question, what can cultural institutions deliver, what can the cultural policy empower in all this setting. This is a real sort of complex system. We have to look at the infrastructures, we have to look at resources. We have your experiences, and I think it's quite interesting to do these researches. I would love to see more about this, and these are the arguments we need to show how important cultural education is in our lives. We also bind now, Ulrike, you mentioned the long-term processes, also to this aspect of sustainability. We wanted to touch also in our web talk series. I really am very thankful for your inputs. Thank you, Diane. Thank you, Joanna and Ulrike, for this short. Yeah, it's quite short. We always have this glimpses, but I think we learned a lot, and we can take all these impulses and this thoughts for thinking further on the subject. There's a lot to do in the future, and we are not finished with maybe transformation, digitalization in the field of education is also something which needs to have more room to discuss this. For this time, I would like to thank you for this closing session, which widens the view in so many directions. And I thank everybody attending us here in our web talk series on cultural education, which is finished now. I can say that we plan to, or that the Academy of Cultural Policy plans to go further with more web talks next year. You will hear from this in the different channels. Stay in contact. We will add all the informations and links and maybe presentations from today on the website of the KUPOG. And for me, it's time to say goodbye and to say have very, very relaxing holidays and a good new year, start into the new year. And thank you very much. And thank you all, you participants connecting to us, to our web talk series. And goodbye and have a nice evening. Thank you.
Thank you.